I'm Stuart Clark. I'm the head of climate transition for Lombard. I sponsor Lombard's climate strategy. It was really interesting hearing from Maria earlier on at the last session. Maria and I work very closely together across NatWest, and Lombard are the largest asset funder. We're part of the NatWest group. And in terms of disclosure, sharing my story, I started my financial career in Reading about 4 decades ago. I've been in insurance and banking and asset funding through that period of time, and have definitely seen Reading become a dominant sort of city, town in the, hopefully city soon, in the UK. So it's great to be back, and I'm really looking forward to today. Over the time of being in the industry, I've led sort of large corporate teams, specialist teams, and but in the last 18 months, very much wanted to support NatWest's purpose-led strategy around sustainability and climate. And so 18 months ago, I stood up a bespoke team, and we've now got our strategy. So I'm proud to walk you through that and what that means for us in terms of how we're looking to support our customers and how we're looking to support businesses more generally. So, what does climate mean to our customers? And I think, a lot of this ground has been covered, but it's worth reflecting on. So for me, it's very much about the opportunity that Maria talked about earlier on, the 175 billion. I think some of the slides are still saying 160 billion, but that shows you how quickly things are moving. That Springboard report has only just come out across NatWest. So huge opportunity. And I'll talk a bit later about what asset finance is, but asset finance is a large enabler of all the investment that's going to be required. If we think about real big picture, all the themes that are coming out of COP27 is there's about a 9 trillion capital requirement to fund net zero. And that's only going to be achieved through a mixture of private and public funding. So it's a huge amount of capital that's required to support global warming only going to 1.5 degrees, and we're already at 1.2. So I don't need to build the case. Why do we need to take action? Everybody's here because they understand why that's compelling. There are, of course, as well as opportunities, always threats. Threats in a business environment and a business community. The threat often of not doing something is as greater as doing something earlier than you'd like to do. So whether it be physical climate risks that businesses are facing, or indeed the extra costs and the existential risks. I mean, Maria talked earlier around the survey we've done in NatWest. About a quarter of SMEs actually have great uncertainty about their future in the current macroeconomic environment. Really important, we lean into that. And then in terms of, doing the right thing, it's massively important that we work together and collaborate. So we think our customers have got that sort of big picture, but of course, as I go and see customers every week, spinning an awful lot of plates. So supply chain issues, staff shortages, the macroeconomic environment, energy costs. It's spinning plates constantly, but we believe climate is an enabler of future opportunity. One thing actually that, a step back for us, Lombard have been funding renewable assets since 2010. And when I think about the traditional assets that Lombard have funded, and again, I'll cover some of that later, wind, LED, solar, we're proud that we've been funding those assets since 2010. We're the largest funder of those assets by numbers of transactions in the UK during that period. And of course, the types of technology that businesses are looking to invest in have greatly changed through that time. And I'll talk to some of that later on. The climate commitments that Lombard has got do mirror closely those of NatWest Group. We've actually just completed about 8-9 months ago a really detailed piece of work. For the first time in our 162-year history, we've baselined our financed emissions back to 2019 using PCAF and SBTI methodology. We've projection planned our portfolio to 2030. How do we halve our financed emissions through that time? So it's a really detailed piece of work. We believe we're the first in the leasing industry to do that in a credible and meaning way. And we do, of course, work closely. I've just finished a 2-year chair of the Finance Leasing Association Green Energy Forum. Working together is really important because we're all learning about how to do this, how to scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So but it's important we understand where we are so we can put together our strategy for where we want to go to. That includes reducing emissions and also lots of green growth opportunities. NatWest has got 100 billion of climate sustainable funding by 25. Lombard, as the asset funder of NatWest customers, we're looking to make a meaningful contribution to that 100 billion, aiming for somewhere around a tenth of that in total. And I'm delighted to confirm, as at the current point in time, we've provided £1.35 billion worth of renewable funding opportunities. So that, again, shows the scale and the intent of what we're looking to achieve. Again, I've sort of been alluding to what asset finance is. I'm sure many of you do know, but just as a sort of setting the scene, you know, we are a complementary source of bank funding, and often when businesses are looking to invest, the first port of call will be their bankers. That can be the right way to invest into renewables and decarbonisation of transports, but often asset finance is a complementary form of funding which is not as well known. And I think a lot of the work that myself and my team are looking to do is bring to life the messaging of how we're our complementary funding source. About 40% of the CapEx that SMEs and corporates make is funded through leasing and hire purchase, that type of facility. But it often has a much better route through to the end product because it's using the asset as security. So it leaves working capital, really important working capital facilities, unimpinged. So just thought I'd explain sort of, the setting the scene. We do think, this is a journey. And as I say, how we've evolved our own strategies, leaning into the opportunities for green growth, the new technologies that are coming on with regards to carbon capture, hydrogen electrolysis, battery storage, they're evolving all the time. And as a funder that uses the asset as security, some of those new technologies are harder to understand. I mean, even when we're looking at asset classes such as transport, where traditionally we funded about half of Lombard's balance sheet, 9 billion balance sheet is wheeled assets. At the moment, a lot of that is in ICE, internal combustion engine type assets. We're very much focused on the future of the transition to decarbonised transport. But again, that's got to be, how do we understand the assets better? How do we take a risk in asset classes that are emerging and evolving with not a future view of what they will be worth? I think a lot of when we speak to SMEs and corporates, to be fair, a lot of those SMEs are concerned about making the first leap of faith. So making investments into asset class that's got a less certain resale market and has got a much higher asset inflation cost. And typically for areas like coaches, buses, commercial transport, you can see the cost of zero or low emission assets are between 200% to 300% more expensive. So that's an immediate barrier, an obstacle to entry into starting a climate transition for those businesses. And that's something which is one of the largest funder in the UK. We think we've got our responsibility to help those SMEs and corporates. Often we also, we did a survey recently on electric vehicles. About 80% of SMEs are looking to transition in the next 5 years in totality, but only 40% have actually got intent to do so in the next 2 years. And that's because the costs and how do they better understand the risks. If you can work with partners such as Lombard and other asset funders, then we can help absorb some of that risk and some of those costs. We can lower the funding costs by taking a risk position in those assets, and we can take the risk away at the end. So it's more about using assets as opposed to owning them. And that's a future trend we're really excited about. Green asset finance is something we launched in February alongside Green Loan. It is a fee-free approach for SMEs with turnover below 25 million. So again, it's a way in which we can show our intent is that it doesn't take away all the costs of investing in those projects, but it does show that we'll do what we can to make it more affordable for our customers to invest in renewables and zero-emission transports. So that product is out there live. We've already done 331 transactions since launch, and we know that it's important. We get our message that those really important products are out there for our customers and every business as well. In terms of some of the asset class that we fund through green asset finance, there's a sort of whole array of sort of weird and wonderful assets, whether it be through LED, solar. Solar, I think, is a massive opportunity for businesses, especially when you combine that with battery storage, backup storage. That is a lot of the ways businesses are looking to harvest energy solutions that lower the cost and are sustainable for the future. But we also fund a whole myriad of different technologies as well. So when you think about making an investment in renewables or in decarbonised transport assets, there are a lot of help out there for you. And I'll go on to that in a bit later. I think about transport if you think about electric vehicles, policy that the government have introduced, the banning of ICE by 2030 will very much force the industry. So we do a lot of work with OEMs. Their production lines have been in the making towards either hybrids or zero-emission electric vehicles for the last 10 years. This is a very serious, significant commitment. And when we think about the opportunities SMEs around the UK, retooling of those factory and plants is massively important. And so again, EVs, I think, will transition. Already over 25% of new registrations are electric vehicle. By the end of 2030, that's going to be 100%. So that's the direction of travel. I think with regards to commercial transport, there's much longer transition times. So we're working closely with a number of OEMs who are looking at whether they be traditional large OEMs or startups. How do you go into how do you go into battery electric? How do you go into hydrogen? That could be fuel cell. It could be internal combustion engine. You look at large OEMs like JCB investing heavily in hydrogen technologies. In hydrogen combustion engine, again, is another source that we're looking at. But the policy for a lot of that transition isn't either till 2040 or 2035. So it's a much longer timeline that the industry needs to be thoughtful to. I was at a Green Finance Institute session earlier this week, and that was focused on coaches. And again, it's a classic case of an industry that's had a lot to think about in the pandemic. A lot of firms really struggling and trying to do the right thing and go towards zero emission or a low emission coach. At the moment, there just aren't many options. There aren't the hydrogen models, there aren't the battery electric that's got range. Typically, a coach operator, for example, would need to go between 200 and 250 miles per day. Battery electric currently only goes to 200. If you start taking into consideration the climate on the day or use of air conditioning or having less seats, the maximum amount of seats on a coach that's electric is 50, potentially less if you've got other facilities. How do you make that work if you're running a business? And that's just an example of an industry that's trying to do the right thing. There's extra costs, there's different risks, and currently the technology is not there for them to actually lean in and embrace that sustainable future. Now, you'll reference here Octopus and Lombard Vehicle Solutions. So we don't have all the answers as a funder. whether that be NatWest or Lombard, but what we do is understand there are pockets of excellence around there, and so forming partnerships like with Octopus Energy, like with ALD Automotive, and other sort of partnerships we're looking to form. How do we take away some of the risks? How do we take away some of the costs? How do we co-create? So I think if I was thinking about running a business myself, those would be some of the areas where do I want to participate? What's my area of expertise? What do I need to do to work with other providers? I think the investment in green technology, it really is going to be a green industrial revolution. I think Reading absolutely can play a really meaningful role within that, is that the types of technology are changing all the time. Myself and my team go to a lot of trade events and fairs. Just today you can hear and listen to a lot of those different technologies that are being created. It really is important we understand which ones are going to prevail. I think most in the VHS Betamax an analogy, I think most of us kind of get that. But that's the very real challenge, that if I'm running a business, where do I go for battery? Do I go for hydrogen? Do I go for alternative fuels? Do I skip that and go and wait to the end transition? A lot of the themes we see, not just of consumers, but for businesses too, is how do you basically have more passengers sharing transport? So those subscription models are going to be really important for funders like banks, like asset funders that traditionally fund in a very vanilla binary way. We need to really think about the future. Shared ownership, subscription models as a service, take away the costs, lower the rental. That is the future, I think, of our industry. And again, those technologies, if you look through the sort of snake here, combined heat and gas, biomass, absolutely fundamental, anaerobic digestion. But then you take the technologies one step further. Battery, I think, will be a huge opportunity, but the setup costs are enormous. And again, circular economy. What happens to those assets at the end of their useful life? Some of the really smart players that we're working with in the bus industry, firms like Zenobē, they can turn a challenge, a risk of the battery and repurpose that battery for a second useful life. So again, that's the way in which we challenge ourselves as a funder. How do we turn a potential challenge and a risk into a business opportunity? I promised Mairead Taylor I wouldn't talk too much about Carbon Planner because Mairead's got a dedicated session later, but it does show that we're kind of aligned. I'll let Mairead talk to what the planner does in more detail. Lombard, very much. We've already got over 200 customers signed up. About 90% of the solutions that come out of the Carbon Planner point to asset finance. So again, we really see asset finance as an enabler of the transition. And how I think about our purpose as a funder is, how do we accelerate the transition faster than would happen without us? So that's definitely the challenge we set ourselves. So there's a couple of case studies. We've got quite a lot, which we're happy to share and talk to. These two case studies are firms I know. LED and solar are the opportunities. But if the technology works, I'd just like to share the story of one of those firms, Sleep Easy.
Sleep Easy was formed in 1924, and we are one of the first manufacturers and users of pocket springs, which is a technology inside our beds, and we are a proud Royal Warrant holder granted by the Prince of Wales. Given the challenges of COVID, we were in a position where we didn't just want to survive, we wanted to thrive, and that meant we had to carry on with our investment. Because we're trying to grow, we have to be flexible, so allowing us to invest and still maintain our cash flow was key to us, and Lombard provided us with that.
So I've been working with Sleep Easy for about 12 months now, and been referred in by their bank manager from NatWest. I have a passion for trying to improve people's energy efficiency and sustainability going forward. FDs, MDs that approach me talking about these sort of things, I'm welcoming these conversations because we have a whole host of different angles we can have.
Well, the process working with Mark, after our first introduction, we brought him on site, shared with him our business plans, showed him the various areas where we wanted to invest, and to be honest, he was as excited about our business as we were. So it felt like we had a partner straight away.
Facing the backdrop of increasing energy prices, the key for the business was to put a solution in place that would provide them with some price surety going forwards for their energy. The customer came to me with a plan. It became very apparent that solar panels would be the way forward for that. We gave them some options around how we can finance that and spread the cost over a suitable period.
The reasons for us doing the solar panels have become even more relevant now. We provide 25% of our own energy. It reduced our carbon footprint by 47 tonnes. It's helped us save money, some of our energy bills, but it also shows that we are a responsible manufacturer, and that's important not just for me as the head of the business, but for everybody in the business to feel proud of what it is that we do.
I feel immensely proud of the impact of the solar panel investment that Sleep Easy have made, not only because it's the right thing to do for the environment, but to be able to mitigate a quarter of your spend is quite something. In terms of the day-to-day operation of the warehouse, there was some other machinery there which we have funded, which will improve productivity and allow them to repurpose their staff into other income-generative jobs.
We handcraft our beds, we're very proud of our craftsmanship, but the trick is making sure that you get technology that enhances that rather than detracts from it. So if you can automate less skilled parts of the operation, that allows the craftsman to really concentrate on the finishing aspects of the bed. That's what we try to do in every investment that we make.
They have a very large workforce that are all very local. I think it's immensely important for the staff to realise that the company are taking this seriously and that they are putting things in place to ensure that they're doing in years to come.
But what I love is for generations of people to be able to work in Sleep Easy, so I like us to keep going for another 100 years. Any manufacturer that doesn't think about their impact on the environment and the social impact won't be around.
So, you know, I'm really proud of watching that. I know Steve, Warren, and again, how we helped Sleep Easy with their own climate credentials, their own climate ambitions, but also provided the finance. But I think the telling thing for me is, and for our team, it's so important we get the message about how much we can fund. Often I go and see customers and the first thing, or fairly early into the conversation, was, I didn't know you funded that. I knew you did wheels, but I didn't know you did all these other things. And that's why it's so important we do talk about that full extent. I mean, we can support you in so many ways, our businesses. So whether it's helping guidance on tracking, we've been through that baseline emission planning and projection. It's not easy, but we're here to talk about it. Taking direct action, looking at bigger plans in terms of capital expenditure plans. I think it's also sort of, we are looking at currently the suppliers that we work with. So one of the often barriers is, I want to invest in renewals. I don't know which suppliers I should work with. We're trying to think about across the bank, how do we create portals or panels of preferred suppliers? That's an idea, it's in ideation, but I think that would be really helpful too. And finally, there's a grandiose picture of myself and the climate team. What I'd say is we are definitely here to help and support you. So if you have any questions, either now or later on, I'll be around. Thanks for your time and good luck with your futures. Thank you.